What's going on with the Seahawks, man? They're making a lot of different moves. This is the first time I've seen the Seahawks make this kind of moves in a long, long time. They obviously have traded DK Metcalf to the Steelers, and DK signed a large contract to Pittsburgh. They traded Geno Smith to the Raiders, and he reunites with Pete Carroll. And the Seahawks have also signed Sam Darnold. Big Ray, I got to ask you, for Seattle, is this a rebuild or a reload? How do you feel?
Well, it's interesting that you use those two phrases, because as I was thinking about coming on today, the thing I was trying to decide was, I use a different word. Is this a reboot or a rebuild? And initially, it looked like it was going to be a rebuild because you got rid of Geno, and I don't think they were looking to get rid of Geno. I think they were surprised that he didn't accept the offer that they extended to him. I think it was like 2 years at probably like around $40 million plus a year. I think he was looking for 3 years. 2 years still kind of puts you kind of in that kind of lame duck area. But then also I do think that there's something about him that wanted to get back to Pete Carroll. And so that kind of worked out for him. And then, the whole DK thing, the releasing Tyler Lockett, like it just seemed as if the sky was falling. And I'm usually like a guy that tries to see the positive sides of things, but man, I felt myself trying to catch the sky too. I was like, man, I have no idea what they're doing. And I'm pretty well connected to the team. I do the broadcast, I practice a lot. I know a lot of the players, and I just had nothing for people, man. I didn't know what they were doing, but I think, signing Sam Darnold, I think they had to have a kind of a good idea that they could get him signed. And to me, it's probably like a lateral move for cheaper and for a younger player. And if there was one thing I would say is that Geno, probably just his overall football knowledge, like how to be a football player, is probably better than Sam Darnold's. Right. But if you can get the running game going, and we can talk about that, the offensive line giving him protection, I think you can build something around him, around play action passes and the QBX offense and this, that, and the other thing. So I was a little skeptical at first, but I'm a little bit more optimistic today.
Absolutely. And yeah, I definitely was a little alarmed and skeptical. I think many Seahawks fans are in alarm for sure. I was a big Geno guy. I was surprised that they ended up trading him, but I understand when it comes to contracts, that's just the business of the NFL. I think them bringing in Sam Darnold, people aren't very high on Sam Darnold despite him winning 14 games with the Vikings in his first real opportunity in a good spot. I think the 49ers probably should have kept him, if we're being real, but that's a different conversation. But yeah, I think them acquiring Sam Darnold, cheaper, younger, obviously, they obviously have to build around him. That brings me to my next question for you. We've seen several offensive line signings, transactions, but we haven't seen the Seahawks in any of these yet. What right now? What are the biggest needs for Seattle going into the free agency realm, and what are they going to do now headed into the draft? Go ahead.
I would say, Bailey, both of us played in the trenches, and as much as this game wants to make itself a quarterback's league, it is still all about what the dudes do up front. And if you can't protect, I don't care who the quarterback is, you're probably not going to have the success you wanted. Even the Chiefs, who kind of managed throughout the year when they got to the Super Bowl, the big difference was in the trenches. They were just getting smashed. And so Seattle came into the offseason the same way they went into last offseason, the same way they went into the offseason before that, with questions at their, especially in their interior offensive line, the two guards in the center. And I don't know that they've answered any of those questions. Lincoln Tomlinson just signed somewhere else, so he won't be back. He was a starting left guard last year. Has played a million games in NFL, but I think his age had caught up with him. Oluwatimbi is the starting center right now. There are some flaws in his game as it relates to just his explosion off the ball. He's plenty strong enough, big enough, smart enough. He's a good leader, all that kind of stuff. But just if you want to run the ball in that zone concept, you need a center that can move people. I don't know that he's proven that he can do that yet. And then the right guard spot with Bradford that they had starting there last year and then rotating in the two rookies they had last year.
Yep.
That spot was just never settled. And if you know anything about playing in this league, it's hard to have a competition for a position on the offensive line during the season. It's just too much going on, too much to learn, too much chemistry you need between the offense and the different players on the offensive line. And so I don't know that they've solved that problem either. And so now you look into this free agent market. There's been several guys, Fries, Smith at the Chiefs. There's been a few dudes that the Seahawks should maybe they were in the mix and just didn't offer enough money or whatever. But for whatever reason, they haven't been able to pick up one of those veteran dudes. I do know that John Snyder doesn't tend to do stuff in the first week or so of free agency. And he also has kind of an aversion to like overspending for guys in the interior offensive line. So I think some of that is going to have to be challenged. Hopefully Coach McDonald, his approach and vision for the team can kind of change that a little bit. There is a pretty deep draft market at guard. So there's some dudes you can pick up, early and also like that second day. There's some guys that can play. So maybe they're kind of leaning towards that space. And then that's going to require the new coaching staff to be good at developing players and developing their linemen to be ready to play, plug and play if you want to go to this reboot space. If you're going to go to the rebuild space, then they're probably going to be really on the cheap in the interior offensive line. And it's probably going to be a couple-year process to kind of get the returns that they want.
And that brings me to my next point. This draft, like you mentioned, I think is pretty loaded on the offensive and defensive line. Not a quarterback-friendly draft. This is definitely a draft for the trenches, so to speak. Seattle holds a 18th overall pick in the first round, 5 of the first 92 picks. And how do you think they can really address, like you mentioned, that interior offensive line at pick 18? I don't know who can fall to them. It's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of unknowns right now, at least with the top 5 or 10 picks, as we see a lot of crazy moves in free agency. But how do you feel about Seattle headed into the draft, 5 of the first 92 picks?
Well, the thing that I like is that they did acquire some capital, and things they can do. They went from having one of the worst cap spaces to probably having like maybe the fifth ranked cap space. And then they acquired a ton of draft picks. And the good thing is that second, third, fourth round space is where John Snyder has done his most damage as a general manager, president of a team. Sure. He does a good job of finding talent in that space. And so, or they're gonna use those pieces to trade up and trade down and try to acquire more things. They're the big guard from Alabama, Booker. He's more of a, like, if you had to compare it to like a receiver, how some receivers have moves and jukes and other guys are just more straight line runners. He's more of a straight line player. So it kind of lends itself to being good in like gap schemes and power schemes. And Kubiak's offense is more of a zone, especially heavy outside zone. And so some people have all these metrics and data and all this stuff are saying like, oh, well, they can't do the outside zone. I'm like, well, you're forgetting about coaching and player development. There's a lot of things I couldn't do in college that I was able to do in the NFL once I got to spend time doing it and being coached to it. So he's a guy I like. The dude from, I think it's South Dakota that really killed it at the Senior Bowl. Love him, man, because the thing I like about him is that he fits the mentality of this team, which is like bring on all challenges. So at the Senior Bowl, he played every position along the offensive line. And because he was doing the most damage, a lot of the defensive linemen were saying, I want to go against him because they're trying to prove themselves against who they thought was the best dude there. And so that says a lot from a guy who wasn't in a Power 5 conference. And it says a lot about his ability because he dominated the Senior Bowl in the one-on-one drills, in the game, like in the team situations. Like he really dominated. So he showed that he could play with big SEC talent, big Power 5 talent football players. And I love his suddenness. Like he has a little bit more explosion. His lateral movement is a little better. So I like him. I don't know if that's a dude that they would take a chance on at 18. But if he's around in that second round, and I think they may one of the draft picks they got was like the 92nd pick in the second round. If they can like move up to that spot, up a little bit and get him, I think he will be a good get for the Seahawks. And so the offensive line, regardless of what has happened in free agency, receiver, release one receiver, traded quarterback, got a new quarterback, you'll probably get another receiver. None of it works if you don't have guys like you and me in the middle making room and space and time for these guys to do what they do.
Absolutely. And Ray, I completely agree with you. I got to ask you about the tackle position, right tackle specifically. Abe Lucas obviously has been dealing with the injury last year and a half, so to speak. Obviously, they had Stone Forsyth playing as well, Big Stone playing as well. But one player I got to ask you about, I don't know if he'll fall to 18, Big Will Campbell from LSU. I think is a hell of a player that they could plug and play at right tackle. I don't know if he's going to fall to 18. We'll kind of wait and see, how the earlier picks play out. Another guy that I would shout out for the interior group, Jackson Slater. He's actually from Washington. He went to Newport High School, comes from Sacramento State. Obviously had a pretty good Senior Bowl, showing out as well in the one-on-ones. That's somebody I think Seattle actually met with at the Senior Bowl, and somebody that Seattle could look at possibly day 3 as well. But going back to the right tackle position, how do you feel about Abe Lucas and the future of that position for the Hawks?
Well, it's been a mystery of what exactly the injury was that he had, and then also what was the surgical procedure that he had. I know throughout the season, the team had a certain timeline when they wanted him back, but then his doctors had a different timeline. And so then at some point, the team just kind of leaned into what the timeline was that his doctors had. And but then watching from a lot of, Abe posts a lot of stuff of him working out and, moving and all this kind of stuff. It looks like he's in pretty good spot to come back and play. The biggest fear was if people were wondering if this was a chronic thing. And so without having any information, it's kind of hard to say. But when Abe is healthy, and Abe is able to play, I think Abe is one of the top 4 or 5 right tackles in the league. He's a big, strong guy. When I scouted him coming out of college, I'm like, he just seems to be a dude that likes to kind of get in the way, but he's not really finishing blocks. And then he got here, and he was like, this dude was like driving his back in the dirt, and I was like, man, the Seahawks got a steal in the 3rd round. This dude was a first-round talent that, for whatever reason, slipped to the 3rd round. And so if he's able to be healthy and start the offseason and good and not have any setbacks, then the right tackle spot is set. There's been conversations about, hey, why don't you move Abe into the guard spot? But I don't think people understand how different the positions are. And they think like 5 big guys up front, they're all interchangeable, and they're just not that. I've had this argument with so many people. And so I think Abe is a right tackle. That's a right tackle. That's a right tackle. That should always be the right tackle. And so I do think they need to address, find a guard that plays guard and put him in there. The guy from LSU, Will Campbell, I think you said his name was. Watched him during the combine, moves well, but man, I'm just telling you, I know they say the SEC is like the big dog of the big dogs, but it's still not the NFL. I don't care how they say it. So his arm length concerns me, and he has narrow shoulders, and so in this league, if a pass rusher can get to your body, man, he can do a lot of damage. And you even though there's great football players in the SEC, every week you're not playing against a dude that is an NFL guy. They might be a good college football player, but it ain't like every single dude you playing against is going to have a long, prosperous career in the NFL. Just 2 totally different games. And so that does concern me a little bit. And then, some people say, well, you can move him inside. I guess you can. Connor Williams did that. He was a big time tackle at Texas, and he was built kind of like Will, shorter arms, shorter stature, moved him into guard, did okay, but then he really excelled at center, and then he got hurt, and then, now he's retired. So there is a space for that. But I don't know that drafting him at 18 to kind of go well, let's see what we got is the type of player you want. You want to do where what you got, what he can do, and you know that he can excel at what it is you're asking him to do. So that's why I would lean more towards, if you're going to get a guard in the first round, get a guard, get one of the top ranked guards in that spot. And then the left tackle spot, Charles Cross. Charles made huge jumps this year. Like, Charles is a guy that didn't usually play with a bunch of power, super athletic, slide left and right, get his hands on guys. But when it came to playing with power in the run game, just didn't, in college, he played a 2-point stance the whole time. And so, but last year, man, he made some strides in the running game. And then he didn't slide back, but the power in the pass rush, so the bull rush is the thing that kind of is his weakness in the pass protection. But this dude consistently last year was grading out. And if you follow the Pro Football Focus stuff, some people use that as their Bible. I don't, but I do use it as information. He was constantly grading out in the top 5 or 10 tackles in the league. So they have people on the edges. They just need to get some good players. They don't have to be all pro, Pro Bowl type players, but they need some good workman-like, get it done players in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely need some dudes in the middle. But I am, like you mentioned, and I'll just say this: I am a big Abe Lucas guy. Comes from Washington State, played with Kate Barrett, who was a high school teammate of mine.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm a big Abe Lucas guy, and if he can become fully healthy, he, like we saw when he actually had a chance to play and not be hurt, he was a hell of a player for the Hawks.